Hello, hello everyone.
What's up, guys?
Hello?
So this is just a second. And we should be live right now. Hello everyone.
Hey, guys.
Really sorry for the um, tech issue that we've been suffering. Um, so let's see who are there. Well, lots of people there. How many people are watching right now?
I think 31.
31. Yeah, all right. We can get more as we go. So this is my first live show. We have a very special guest today. Xiangyu, he's a Marxist, Leninist rapper, and he always have the best take on Twitter. Everyone say hi to
过奖了。
Xiangyu.
Hello.
Alrighty. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So how did you came to be where you are right now? Where you are coming from?
So, I guess you mean like my political development?
Yes, yes. Or in general.
So,
It's up to
in
you.
general. So, I guess I grew up in America, but I've always been like, I've always felt connected with my Chinese identity, especially since when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in Taiwan. And like, before I started school, it would be months at a time. And then after that, it was like almost every summer I would spend my time there. So I was never removed from my cultural roots. Like it happens with some people, but another thing is, I guess, growing up, if you're from an immigrant family, then like English is not your first language, and when you're first growing up, your friend group will be like your parents' kids. I mean, your parents' friends' kids,
Yeah, very true.
and like in that sort of situation, like we would be talking to each other in Chinese, but after a while, like when we all started going to school, like you know like with me, it's like if I'm used to talking to somebody in one language, then I'll default to that language. Doesn't matter what other languages they speak, even if we both speak other languages that we both understand. But I realized, like, to them, like Chinese seemed like a very uncool thing to speak, and it's like they just kind of wanted to distance themselves from it.
Hmm.
And I don't know. And I guess the political development aspect. I mean, so that was like I guess one of the symptoms of imperialism that I noticed. Because I
Yeah.
mean, it's one thing to adapt to the language of your surrounding. It's another to just kind of totally look down upon like your own culture and language. That's not. I mean, it's normal, but it shouldn't be normal. It's a symptom of imperialism and white supremacy because you go to like I noticed like when you go to Taiwan, why is it that over there, oh, knowing English is very cool, but in America it's like
Yeah.
knowing English is cool, but knowing other languages is not necessarily cool. So it's like you notice these things and you start wondering why. So then I guess to really understand why, I guess I had to start studying like history of like my background and also just talking to parents and elders and stuff like that. And just sort of piecing things together. And I was never I was never really like a radical liberal.
Hmm.
I've always kind of sympathized with the underdog. And I've also noticed that I don't know, I just felt that a lot of times the narrative that I was being told wasn't the truth. I guess growing up in an immigrant family, it's not unusual, or not even just the immigrant family, even just a minority family. You're used to hearing sort of like one mainstream narrative, but then like you also like hear this sort of other narrative like among your own community. Like I don't know, Ezra, I don't know how long you've been in America, but
Yeah. My experience is a little bit different because I was raised in mainland China. But it's interesting that you brought up that English is very valued in non-English major non-English speaking native speaking country. In China, however, that people learn English from a very young age. Students, I went to a international school, so they really emphasize on English. But even in general, even go to local school, at least in the coastal cities of Shanghai or the likes, they will teach you English, and it's a symptom of the global hegemonic
it's a status
center.
symbol.
Yeah, and the relationship between the center and the periphery, right? Like you have to learn everyone at the periphery in order to be successful has to learn the English language. Is the language of the world in a sense. But I think what's ironic is that for China, it has become its supposed weakness of being at the periphery has become a strength of its own because many more Chinese understand English, proportionally speaking, and absolutely, than Americans understand Chinese, right? I think Trump during his campaign this year says something like, "If I don't win, you are all learning Chinese." Um, as China becomes more and more important, the Chinese language becomes more important in the world. But currently, that's not the case. But it's interesting to think about this dynamic because, well, people are supposedly marginalized, though those marginalized in terms gain a different kind of strength through their marginalization, through their weakness. This is a very interesting dialectical reversal.
And I think another thing is it is important to learn English because as long as imperialism exists, you have to. I mean, not everybody has to, but all peoples throughout the world, like among like their nationalities and whatever, they need to have people who understand the imperialist language just to function in this world or to even defeat imperialism. That's kind of that's kind of why when I went to the DPRK, for example, like they talked about how English education is important because we need to understand the imperialist language,
Mm-hmm.
and because like things like science and stuff are dominated by imperialism exists. You can't just wish it away. So they acknowledge its existence, and they're like, if we want to keep up with the world's developments and stuff, then we need to have people who are proficient in the language. But I guess, do you want me to speak more on my political development?
Um, yeah, I think because you identify as a Marxist Leninist, and we here as infrareds,
Mhm.
due to, but I think the term Marxist-Leninist, like many political labels, originated from the 20th century and means a lot of different things to different people, right? So, what does your ideology, Marxism-Leninism, means to you right now, and how do you think Marxism-Leninism today in the 21st centuries, in the context of the West, for example, in America, differentiated from its original context in Russia, in China, in Vietnam, etc.?
That's a very good question. I think the thing about Marxism Leninism is it's never been a dogma, right? Because
Right.
dogmatism can lead to revisionism, like opportunism and that sort of stuff. Like you see, like there's this sort of idea among people who don't study Marxism Leninism who think, oh, if you're a Marxist Leninist, that means you want to replicate everything that's happened in the Soviet Union or in China and then just copy paste it and apply it to different societies, right? There is that sort of misconception. But Marxism Leninism is basically, well, you have Marxism, right? Marxism is kind of
Yes.
like you have, what is it? I can't summarize it right now. It's like what the German ideology, like you have dialectics, and then you have like Marxian economics,
Mm-hmm.
and you have all that stuff. And you're basically calling for it's the study of why there is, like how capitalism works and why there is a state. For example, like states arose it's not because states arose first and then classes exist. It's the other way around. So it's a huge aspect of Marxism Leninism is dialectical materialism, which is you as opposed to idealism. Idealism is more like you think of something and then things are because of how you interpret them. There's no objective truth. Whereas dialectical materialism is there. We live in an objective world. We live in a material reality. Our thoughts are a reflection of that. And yeah, there's no way to like totally know everything. But the more you study the objective world, the closer you reach the truth. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very interesting to contrast these understanding of Marxism, Leninism, and specifically the dialectical materialism, with how not just Marxism but left-wing politics in general is thought of in the United States or in the West in general today. Because I don't know about you, but in my impression, people here in the U.S., they, to put it shortly, they don't understand dialectical materialist. They don't tend to have the sense of it when they approach a political ideology, or whether it's Marxism, anarchism, or any other socialism. They think it's a sect of axiom, a sect of like you say, the dogma. They think, oh, this is what they did. This is what socialism means. This is how they defined as it is in a specific context, and therefore we should try to repeat that in the United States and bring that in a completely different context, right? I think it's interesting because starting from Lenin and also with Mao, their definition of Marxism was at that time very different and unorthodox compared to the mainstream Marxism, right? Lenin was under a lot of fire for his Marxism, and Mao certainly was. He was the first person who really emphasized the revolutionary potential of the peasantry as opposed to just the industrial proletariat. He emphasized the other parts of the equation.
Yes, I think that's important because of the way China developed, it was a semi-feudal semi-colony. Capitalism couldn't have developed the way it developed in Western Europe, where they weren't semi-feudal semi-colonies.
Yeah.
Like China was just forced into an existing world order
Mm-hmm.
that it had that it didn't really take part in forming, and it had to navigate through that. And when that happens, the classes aren't going to develop as like this sort of predetermined path. Oh, this feudalism is going to end and the bourgeoisie is going to rise. because the bourgeoisie, I mean, okay, you had the national bourgeoisie, but you also had the compradors and the imperialists, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And the national bourgeoisie is definitely not going to overpower the imperialist bourgeoisie in that sort of context. And I think with Lenin, he was under fire because the Second International, like Bernstein, Kautsky, and all those opportunists, what they did was they took Marx, right? They looked at him like they almost like a religion. They're like, oh, Marx said that revolution would first happen in the industrialized, advanced capitalist countries.
that's
But the thing is, when Karl Marx was alive, he did not get to see monopoly capitalism develop fully to its highest stage, right? So he couldn't have so he made that sort of prediction based on, what he saw and what he knew. He didn't say, oh, it's definitely going to happen. So Lenin was actually staying true to the spirit of Marxism, which is you seek truth from facts. 实事求是.
yeah, yeah,
Marx didn't say that, but that's basically what dialectical materialism is. And he analyzed, okay, now we're in a new situation. New situations call for new analyses, and they call for new strategies and new tactics. So, he got a lot of fire because he went against the Second International and their what I like to call dogmatic revisionism. Some people think, oh, revisionism is just like you make up new bullshit. No, no, no. If you're overly dogmatic, it becomes revisionism because you don't look at the context of where those predecessors made their analyses, and you just really want to follow them through, but you're in a different world.
right.
And by doing that, you become a revisionist.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to think of our condition today. I see Chris Morlock says Western thoughts claims objectivity, while in actuality being the definition of subjectivity. I think there's a lot of truth to it because, first of all, it's interesting that historically, as we know, in the 20th centuries, all the socialist revolution began not in the quote-unquote advanced capitalist society, but in countries like Russia, countries like China, like you said, who are feudal or semi-feudal. And it's compared to that condition to the United States today. So our position is that the dialectics that was going on between the feudal peasantry and the industrial workers that we've seen in 20th century Europe and Asia is still going on. It's still ongoing even in the United States today. But because the material condition different is changing, the form that it takes is different. For example, I think we can talk about the American left. They emphasized what is comparable to the industrial proletariat in the 20th century, the people in the urban center, right? Largely from immigrants and immigrants' background who does not have a sense of identity that's with the American whatever American identity is, and this process is ongoing. This sort of constant disruptive process of capitalism. Meanwhile, in the countryside, in the heartland of the United States, you have people who are not peasants in the strict sense, who are former industrial workers, former people who were previously considered as the industrial proletariats. They are not the ones who are being left behind. They are the ones who are behind in developments, because the United States, despite being the global hegemon, the internal development is actually really behind to certain what they call the form of Asiatic capitalism. And I think it's interesting. There's this contradiction today between peasants and workers is still very real today. But it's only taking a different form. So what do you think about this? What do you think is the biggest weakness of the American left when confronting the present condition in your experience?
There's too many things to talk about.
Yeah.
I really don't know where to begin. I mean, I'm not some like I'm not gonna front and say that I'm like some sort of like revolutionary who has like gotten a lot of stuff done. So it's like
Neither
so it's like
us. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like, do we have the answers? I don't know. We have certain guides to actions. We have inspiration from which we can draw. But I mean, theory comes from practice. But I do think if you want to really something that's very, I guess, something that's more general is I do think that what is called the left today is very petty bourgeois minded.
Hmm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a lot of it is because with I guess this really has to go if we want to talk about it, we have to talk about some of the cultural programs of the CIA, the State Department that happened in the last century.
Mhm.
Because what makes social movements powerful? What's something in common with let's say like the Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Vietnamese Revolution, the et cetera, et cetera. It's you have the intellectuals, right, who are the leftist intellectuals,
Mhm.
not just like any intellectual, but they are connected with the masses. Basically, it's like what many revolutionaries have said. These sort of communist intellectuals had to be proletarianized, and then the proletariats, the peasants, they have to be intellectualized, right? But the way that the new left was kind of synthesized by these cultural programs is it kind of divorced them from the workers. And that's when you also had this sort of neoconservatives, like the neocon movement, where they like kind of like populism got just hijacked by the right. So you got rid of the left populism, you replace it with right populism, and like the masses, especially the white masses, they're just kind of drawn to reaction. I mean, it's not going to benefit them. Like it'll benefit them in some ways, but it doesn't get rid of the root causes of why they're put in a unfavorable position. And then you have these sort of intellectuals, like these college campus radicals, who they're kind of, if you're divorced from the masses, then you can have all the right ideas, but they're never going to be transformed into action. And if you're kind of not grounded in the masses, you're not going to really be able to go forward. I think and then also in any revolution, there's two aspects. There is the aspect of tearing the old reactionary order down.
Yeah.
And then there's the second aspect of constructing something new. There's a destructive aspect, but the destruction is done for the purpose of construction.
Mhm.
When you agree?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
most people, like, let's say you go to the Russian Revolution, what were the masses promised? Peace, land, and bread.
Exactly.
In the World War. Why? Because they were sick of being sent over abroad to fight for the capitalists and to die. They wanted stability. At the end of the day, what they wanted was stability.
Yes.
Whereas you had some people like Leon Trotsky who just kind of wanted to see the world burn.
Exactly.
Right. So then these kind of trends, they had to be kind of reconciled, and you had to take aspects from both. They have to keep each other in check. It's kind of like, for lack of a better term, like the yin and the yang of revolution.
Definitely.
That if you divorce them, that's why nowadays you have the aspect that's seeking stability, but then the bourgeoisie has them controlled, and they're like, okay, if you want stability, this is what you do. This is conservatism, and this is you want to return back to the old days when you had a nice job, like a nice factory job at GM, where you could afford a house, you could have a husband or wife, you have two kids and a dog and two cars, a front yard, that sort of stuff. The American dream, basically.
Mhm.
And then so you have them divorced from the left, and then you entice them with these sort of make America great again, right?
Yes. Yes.
So then that's where this whole Trumpism thing comes from now. And then you tell the left, okay, you know what? screw the stability part. Just keep on pushing for stuff that, like, wanting to see the world burn. Then you have like ultra leftism, you have like social democracy, you have like all sorts of just all sorts of things that aren't that people aren't drawn to, except for other, angry, disillusioned youth. And their anger is valid. Their anger is very justified. We live in a very unjust society, but it's part of the CIA's cultural programs is, okay, we're not going to get rid of this anger because we know capitalism exists, imperialism exists, white supremacy exists, all of this shit exists. But what we can do is we can channel the energy to somewhere where it's not going to change anything,
Yeah.
I think that's the main problem of the Western left.
Yeah, I think we all here agree completely, and Henry and Jorge can add to that later. Everybody say hi to Jorge. Oh, by the way, is my volume okay right now? Some people saying that I need to turn up my volume.
What about me? Do I need to turn mine up?
They didn't say anything about that. I assume you're fine, but
Okay.
I agree completely with what you have said. The American left today, and this is a bit of my personal experience. When I moved to America, that's almost 8 years ago. I wasn't political, right? I was just some random Chinese kid in the United States, and as I was getting into leftist politics, I was initially very surprised. I find this very familiar because for a person growing up in China, but even in non-socialist, non-Western country, you have some familiarity with what revolutionary politics represents, or even just progressive politics represents. Because once you come to America, you feel like it's something completely different. You have like leftists who I feel like who are much more interested in feeling good about themselves, in
Yes.
trying to be right, trying to have all the best hot takes in the world, rather than trying to form a concrete relationship with the people, which is very strange because with Mao, which many leftists purport to, even Western leftists purported to respect, he emphasized the necessity of the mass line of connecting with the people. That's no matter how smart you think you are, how much theory you have read, you are nothing without the people as the base. And
Could I add to something about Mao?
go ahead.
His whole thing about change and leading revolution and dealing with the masses with their positivity and their imperfections and dealing with social ills is you 治病救人. You save the patient by curing the disease. But I see a lot of people who just seem to believe that the person is defined by the disease. So curing the disease just means totally disregarding and just pushing away that person.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yes. And what about you two? Do you have anything to add with your experience?
Yeah, I feel like the Western left has a very strong purity complex, and you see it also with like their approach towards history, where they just kind of want to abolish their own history and their own historical roots or historical figures for not fitting into the contemporary moral standards. It's very individualistic too. It's almost like this like very individualistic mindset where they have to keep themselves like pure and clean of reality and just how the world is, as opposed to getting their hands dirty and really dipping their hands into the water.
Could I add to something about that?
Go ahead.
You talked about abolishing historical figures, and certain historical figures like Christopher Columbus and stuff, yeah, they shouldn't be upheld anymore. But there's one problem. Okay, I'm all for tearing down the statues, whatever. But one problem is, okay, you tear down the statues, what do you replace them with? Because people of all cultures, they want to be able to identify with these sorts of figures that they feel define their own roots. We all want to have like belonging to a group, a cultural group, like is very important to everybody.
I agree
That's why
completely.
identity stuff is very powerful, because at the end of the day, you know, this is very it's this sort of stuff is sacred to every individual. But it's like when we decide, okay, we're going to tear down, okay, like okay, fuck Christopher Columbus, fuck George Washington, fuck Thomas Jefferson. Okay, this is good. This is good. I'm totally for that. But if you're doing it in a way where where the masses don't understand why they're bad, they'll feel that, oh, you're also abolishing them.
You're
And if
attacking
you're
them.
not,
Exactly.
yes, and if you're not replacing those Columbus statues with I don't know what kind of Mao Zedong statues. Well, you might have a lot of explaining to do if you want to put a Mao Zedong statue. Like, people aren't just gonna warm up to that right away. But you know, I mean, you look at Germany. You know, when East Germany denazified, what happened? All of the Nazi figures that got destroyed, they were replaced with, you know, Ernst Thälmann and all of the other. I don't know if I pronounced his name right. Sorry. If to German listeners, but you know, all of those anti-fascist and revolutionary figures of their own of their country's history. And you know, if you want to get rid of Christopher Columbus statues, that's great, but you also need to start pushing, you know, historical figures of that have existed in this country. For example, like Huey Newton or John Brown, Fred Hampton, or Martin Luther King Jr. Oh, Martin Luther King Jr. is already like, but he's been very he's been very his revolutionary content's been divorced from the name. They've kind of whitewashed him, but you know what I mean, right? You need to have new figures that people can identify with. Otherwise, it's just I don't know. I mean, these same people are the ones who, like, you also have these pseudo leftists who were very cultish about RBG, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but then they're the same people who make fun of the Koreans, North Koreans specifically, for, you know, upholding and deeply admiring, you know, Kim Il Sung, Kim Jong Il, which is like, why do they, but why is that sort of culture there? I mean, you don't have to agree with it, but part of what I see is when I was there is it feels good to it's not worship, but you know what I mean, like to collectively like kind of uphold the same figure and to feel like you belong to a greater family than like your own family, you know?
Yeah.
A sense of belonging. People take comfort in that. That's why absent of that sort of stuff in the West, that's why subcultures are such a big deal. I mean, subcultures exist everywhere in the world, but I mean, Ezra, you grew up in Shanghai.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that subcultures there, they exist, but they aren't as aren't as sacred to an individual's identity when compared to the US, correct?
Yes. Sorry, there's a problem with the screen. I'm gonna fix it right now. Let's see.
Yeah, you know, mentioning the RBG thing is very recently, like in the last few years. It seems like worship of politicians has reached like kind of unheard of heights. And there's a very like bland aesthetic behind it. You know, this kind of aesthetic of just like almost like pure law. That's what I think of when I see like, you know, those pictures of RBGs, like worship of like, you know, just like this kind of empty, bland, almost like uh, aesthetically unpleasing lawfulness. Uh,
Exactly. But then like these same people will mock, you know, other countries for having their sort of like kind of cult of personality. And it's like but it does tell us something. It does show that what I said about, you know, okay, you can get rid of certain figures, but then you have to replace them with someone revolutionary for people to follow. Otherwise, you're creating a power void. And if you aren't organized enough to fill that void with something like, you know, progressive and revolutionary for people to move forward, you know, power in these situations, okay, like whoever is best positioned to fill a power void or fill any vacuum will fill it. That's why like Trumpism like was on the rise, just because of you know, I don't know where I was going with that. I mean, I know where I was going, but I can't put it into words. But yeah, it's taking advantage of like the basic psychological needs of people. You know, you don't have to offer them as a communist, you should offer them solutions. But I mean, if you're just an opportunist and you want to like take power, you don't have to offer them tangible solutions. You just need to give them like you just need to make them feel like they matter. That's what Trump did with a lot of his supporters. He didn't do shit for them, but
I think it goes back to what you said earlier. People really just want stability and like this ability to return to some kind of like normal, decent life, and that's also true culturally. Being grounded in a culture.
yes, exactly. So I think what the Western left really needs to do is realize these things and then think, okay, how can we work our strategy to take these realities into account? Because I think once you take these realities into account and you actually do something about it, then you'll have a powerful left.
And here's the complicated thing about American culture, though, is that lately I'm realizing that it's almost kind of hard to pin down like a singular American culture, because like on the one hand, you say, for example, you have black culture, right, and you have a black nation inside of the U.S. Then on the other hand, you have like kind of like southern, or not even just southern, but like rural white culture. That's obviously very embodied by like the MAGA movement and whatnot. And I think maybe, I mean, if there was like an official American culture, maybe that would be the closest thing to it. But then on the other hand, you have the strange things going on, like kind of in cities, but also maybe even more so in suburbs, where you have this kind of like bland universalism that obliterates all kind of like cultural particularity.
It's where culture goes to die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you have this kind of weird dynamic going on culturally in America.
You know what I realized though, when you talk about that sort of like the bland, like anywhere USA suburbs, when you're part of that, you really feel. I know because I grew up in the suburbs. It's that's why like my like Chinese identity is so important to me, just because like what do I have besides that? When you're in suburbia, like that's why like especially with like suburban youth, middle like suburban youth like from the middle classes, like especially like the white kids, why are they like so into subcultures, like the whole like a lot of them go through like the emo phase or like the punk phase and stuff. It's because they're longing for that sort of feeling of belonging. That's the thing that's missing. And when that sort of innate desire is left unfulfilled, it leaves you very vulnerable and easy to manipulate. And I think the bourgeoisie is very aware of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Insecure people are much easier to manipulate and control and rule over.
Right. And then like you say, like the Western left, especially Americas, only have destruction. They only have things that's destabilize, right? They say, no, your this and this is wrong, your this is a privilege, your history is wrong, your very sense of identity is constantly being challenged, constantly being destroyed, to the point that the very meaning of being a person, of it being human, is always being disrupted. So you always have leftists just as, you're not pure enough. Like that's why the conservatives really take advantage of the cultural warfare in the United States. That's saying, oh no, the left, and I think they're right, because as far as the current American left goes, you are always they are always trying to destroy who you are. They are the ones who want to attack you. They are the one who want to
find anything to attack you.
Yeah. They want to destroy the family. They're associated with the pedophiles or something. But I think on some level there's great truth to that, because from where I'm from, even before I was political, and the Chinese revolutions give people a sense of a new identity. The people for example, it's always denigrated by liberals as being nationalist and ultra nationalist, but this
It's a continuity of traditional Chinese culture, but also a break from it.
yeah, but also a break from it. And China is not just a nation state, and also this is new. This is what revolution is. Revolution is not just an abolishment of anything, just destroy anything. You see, every revolution there's a sense of a new identity that's in some way new, but in other ways a continuity of the past.
Exactly.
Right now, there's only destruction. There's no construction of any kind. I think Caleb Maupin talked a little bit about this in some of his videos, but and it's becoming so bad to the point that even being human is being challenged, is something that the left not take for granted these days. What do you think about that?
I think it's perfectly true, and I guess that goes into another problem of the Western left. Not really just the Western left, but just kind of especially like people from like Americans from a more middle class background. Like we talked about it privately, like kind of the lack of ability to 做人. 做人 literally means to be a person. It's kind of like, think about
Hey guys.
All right, all right. Are we all back? Sorry about that.
I think our guest isn't back yet, but everyone from the group seems to be here.
So, while we are waiting for him, Jorge, do you have anything to add on the issue of 做人?
I think that I come here only to accompany. But oh,
sorry about that.
It's okay. So issues on our end.
Actually, I don't know what I'm sorry about. It wasn't my fault.
no, it's our fault.
So as I was saying, 做人 literally means to be a human. But think about how in English there's the expression "be a man," but that's kind of patriarchal nowadays because it's kind of like you know what I mean. But think about that expression, and it implies just knowing how to interact with people and treat people with respect and be responsible and all that stuff, but just ungendered. That's kind of what 做人 is. And I feel like among the Western left, at least with through my experience and my interactions with people, there seems to be missing. There's a lot of pettiness. Some people will take personal vendettas and then find reasons to just carry out character assassinations against other people who haven't really done anything bad other than like because you don't like them, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
like, I know a really good example. I used to before I moved to Taiwan, I'm back in the US now. Before I moved to Taiwan, I was part of an organization, and this one kid really didn't like me. So you know what he did? He went around telling everybody that he believes I was a cop and that I was infiltrating. just because he didn't like me. I think it was because he had a bad experience with a Chinese man like earlier on in his life, and I think there was an aspect of racism. I think that's what happened. But anyways, he ended up like joining the military. So it's like, yeah, you're gonna cop jack at me, and then you're gonna join the military despite like knowing full well what imperialism and all that stuff is. Go fuck yourself. There's a lot of that going on. You know, when you work with people, you don't have to like them, but you should know how to 做人 basically. And for example, I was talking to somebody once, and she was saying we were talking about just backwards ideas and stuff, and she said, I don't care like even if you are from like a third world country that's like super Catholic, if you are homophobic, you're a terrible person. And you know, I agree, homophobia is very bad. But if you're from a third world country and you're like from a rural area and like and it's like super Catholic and you're just not very exposed to these things, you're going to have those backwards ideas. And the thing is, unless somebody proves like unwilling to learn and correct their ideas, and you know, you don't just dismiss them right off the bat and say, oh, you're terrible, because you know what, like with that sort of attitude, it is in a way classist, because you're assuming that everybody has had the same education that you've had. At the same time, like, you know, we shouldn't assume that just because people aren't as educated that they're not capable of learning, but we have to work with people with their imperfections and deal with, I mean, it's different for an individual to have like some backwards ideas than from like to like actually like actively spreading those ideas. You know, like there is a difference. I know if I don't make that clarification, somebody's going to read between lines that aren't there and then say that, oh, I'm making excuses for, you know, I'm making excuses for like just reactionaries. No, that's not the case. We live in a reactionary society, and the dominant ideology is reactionary. So just by virtue of living in this society, all of us without exception will have some reactionary ideas. And as the vanguard, what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to actively combat it and then guide people along into, you know, fighting the reaction that they've internalized.
Right.
But a lot of the Western left is just you know, just people making these realizations for themselves and then going out and acting superior to everyone because they figured these things out earlier than other people.
Right. But I think if they are just merely being arrogant, right, they just say, you're stupid, I've read this, I know this, I'm enlightened, I'm beyond your concern over your national identity, I'm beyond your concern about your family or the stability in your life. If it's only just that, then at least that would be annoying but manageable. But I think what's happening in the United States is that there is not only not a real left, the left as it is, as it currently exists, is really just almost like the institutional lapdog of the ruling classes of the American empire, because of what they are doing is, because they don't have actual power by themselves. So what they're doing is they can attack people for their supposed moral faults, and these people are
as if these people never had bad ideas before.
Yeah, exactly. But not only they attack you, the power that supports these leftists to even attack them is the ruling power, it's the establishments, right? Like that's why when they, for example, you know, when Bernie Sanders campaigned back in 2016, and you know, he did have lots of popular supporters who are dissatisfied with the establishment, and you know, you have some of the people using leftist language attacking them for, you know, being, I don't know, sexist or chauvinist of some kind. But what gives them the power to criticize morally? You cannot just, moral criticism is not just, you need power to do that. You know, they are doing it from the position of the imperial establishments, if you may. And
I think this sort of culture of just like espousing right think and this sort of hyper individualistic virtue signaling was actively promoted by, you know, the cultural programs of the CIA that I talked about, like the Congress of Cultural Freedom, because as we can see, it keeps the masses fractured. You know, no matter, I think what's very important when we delve into politics is, as with everything, when we deal with anything, one question we need to ask is this good or bad for the people? Does this help the people? That's why I feel like this sort of the a lot of Westerners are just very averse to critical thinking. That's why on BuzzFeed and like Tumblr, that's why the BuzzFeed and Tumblr pseudo left was so popular, because you don't have to critically think. You just have like these sort of like, it's like kind of not 10 commandments, but like 1,000 commandments, where like everything just has like everything is a blanket rule. You know, if you are you know, this identity, then you are automatically this. If you are this, then there's if you can check all the boxes of marginalized groups, then it is physically impossible for you to be reactionary, and everyone should listen to you. I'm not saying people shouldn't listen to these voices, by the way. I'm just saying that's not very material. That's very idealistic, because within any group there's going to be reactionaries, but you know, there is, you have to admit there is that line of thinking in the West.
And I think before you judge anyone or any mass to be reactionary or not, you have to be with the mass in the first place. Like you say, you have to not only 做人 or be a man on an individual level, you have to be humans and with other humans, right? You almost have to begin with a populist mindset before you talk about progressive change, before you talk about, I don't know, revolution or something even more crazier than that. And in addition to that, you cannot speak, you cannot criticize, you cannot attack them before you adopt this position. Like, I'm not just saying you pretending to have this learning, but actually having a roots in your community, actually have a basis, and you have to speak the language that, you know, people understand. I think in America, lots of the language our leftists use are extremely alien, to say the least. I think the most egregious example, I'm not Latino, but like I know, you know, for example, like a Latinx with an X, which is not pronounceable in Spanish.
You're gonna get so much shit for saying this.
Well, you're not really familiar with our stream. This is probably by far our most polite and nicest stream that we ever had. He doesn't know.
Yeah, and I guess that means Ezra, when we go to Spanish speaking countries, we're no longer chinos, we're chinks.
Yeah, but
with an X.
But X is not pronounceable in Spanish, and it's, I think some survey says like only 7% or so Latino people are actually use that term.
The thing
they
is,
don't identify with these terms.
Yes,
are very English based institutional people in the university try to say you have to use this term, and it's caused a lot of distrust, and legitimately so. Like
in Latin America,
dislike.
Actually, if you want to be gender neutral, they prefer instead of Latino or Latina, they say Latine, like with an E.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah,
but even so, you know, the masses, ordinary people, they start using a certain language, and you have to begin from their language. That's
not, by the way, to the audience, that doesn't mean, okay, we're going to start saying terrible things and throw around racist and like homophobic slurs. No, that's not what we mean. Like, no, we're not going to be doing that.
No. But you know, I literally was in like a Discourse server of supposedly a leftist circle that's not known, that's pro China and ML or some kind, and they were like forbidding people for using the word stupid because they think the term stupid is ableist. Yeah.
You know, you go to China, like they're pro China, right?
Yes.
You go to China and they'll get bullied so hard.
No. The funny thing is, like in the channel, you have actual Chinese people like me, or people who grew up actually speaking the Chinese language, and everybody say how stupid this thing is. You know, like language cannot function without these contexts, without these insults, without these history. Like, you know, to forbid people from using that word, you are forbid people from being human in the first place.
This Chinese American woman, okay, who clearly doesn't have a good command of the Chinese language, tried to cancel me once because I called someone a sapi. And because B, the character B, like the who 下面一个穴,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I know.
It I mean, it doesn't have the same connotations, but I think like Google translated that word to cunt.
Yeah, yeah.
But the
I
thing
think
is,
it literally
sapi-
means that, but it's when you
It doesn't
say it, you
literally
don't
mean
refer
that
to.
either. It doesn't
Okay,
literally mean
okay.
that either. It just means vagina. It's just a crass way to say it, but it doesn't have the same connotations that C word in English does. You know
It
what I
doesn't
mean?
even. It's not even gendered, right? If like you call it. Like,
Sapi really isn't gendered.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
and sapi is used exactly the way that dumbass is used. But then because Google translated that character to cunt, she decided to try to cancel me. So then I was like, okay, this is funny. So then I posted that whole thing on Bilibili and Weibo. And you know what the Chinese people said? I mean, why doesn't
it's
she
not even
accuse Google
gendered for
Translate of
people
being
for
a
using the word
misogynist? Of all of the words that it could have chosen, Google was the one who chose that word, not me.
Yeah, yeah. Like saying it's stupid.
And to that woman, I only have one thing to say. 看你俩鸡掰.
Like if you says like saying the word stupid disabled is fine. Are you saying that's actually disabled people or they're actually stupid or something? Like it is. Come on, like the way thing is like Haas, who you barely just met, always talk about the Anglo understanding of language. The Americans, Anglo-speaking people, tends to reduce language just to its literal form or meaning in this very static sense. Words are not connected to each other. Word exists by itself without social connotation, without context, without history. So therefore, if you use this word is defined as bad, therefore you cannot be used without. They think if you just change the language, you can change the reality. And I think with the Western left, and there's a very popular Chinese term these days, it's called 白左, right? It literally means the white left.
Or it could be explained as 白痴左派 or idiotic left. But I guess that's ableist.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Dude, can I use the bathroom real quick? Drink a lot of tea and coffee.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Ezra, when you were talking about that last night, I was thinking the same thing too. Like, isn't that kind of insulting to like disabled people if you just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you're saying they're stupid, they're lazy. Like, if you're saying like all these words are ableist, it's almost like you're calling them that.
Yeah. And let's see. What are the chat talking about?
That's a good idea.
And remember, Gen Zedong has lots of ultras. Yeah, that's the community, and it's not just a problem of ultras. It's even if they identify not as ultras, I think fundamentally the very mindset of these so-called Western leftists is a fundamental one of arrogance and one of condescension. They use their politics as a cover for their own personal insecurity, right? Like, I think someone mentioned Jay Sakai, and I think, the politics of, those white working class are just irredeemable. It's just an excuse for your personal political failure. There's really nothing more than that, in my view. So, yeah, we're talking about we're talking about 白左, so it can either means white left, or as Xiangyu told us, it can either mean idiotic left. But I think it's a very popular term in China these days to describe the Western left who are into performance, into proving their rights. People, it's related to what people criticize as so-called identity politics, even though it's more ambiguous than that. But it's a type of leftist that everybody despises, not just in China, but I think in non-Western world, people know like what do they mean. Like these people who goes into the masses, not in both in their own country and to other country and just finger wag at them and lecture them, even though they themselves is already at a privileged power position. That's why like people like Greta Thunberg is extremely hated outside of the Western circle. What do you think?
I agree. I'm in total agreement.
Yeah.
I think that's why I highly recommend people read Mao. But then I've heard people say, oh, that's reading Mao, it's irrelevant because we're not going to support the national bourgeoisie because there is no national bourgeoisie in America, and we're not going to be having peasants surround the cities from the countryside because no, that's not the point of reading Mao. The point of reading Mao is to see how he analyzed how he carried out concrete analyses of concrete situations and formulated strategies that worked. And another thing about his writings is it's generally just good like common sense advice in general. It's like, for example, his works on like how like artists should carry out their political work, in their art and stuff. It's just good advice in general, basically don't be a dumbass.
Yeah, and I think the concrete analysis of your concrete condition is very important because whenever I think it was Caleb Maupin, who we don't agree with him on everything.
We
but
need a government of action, okay? Government of action fights for working families.
10-10 impression. I don't know what the chat thinks about this. I guess we'll see the rating soon. But when he talked about, the very idea of us American and socialism with American characteristics, right? And then it's like half of the left has just lost their mind on this and just immediately just has this knee-jerk reaction like, how do you have a socialism of American characteristics? Even though this is, regardless of what you think that socialism should be or should look like, this is what you should be doing in the first place, right? You cannot just, because I feel like a lot of the leftists, even the, in fact, especially the so-called anti-imperialist, even pro-China leftists, they fetishize this, on these foreign countries as a way to escape from actually dealing with the problem in their own society.
Yes. But the thing is, they'll go to the countries that they fetishize, and I don't think they're going to be really welcomed.
No. You think someone who says like it's evil is to say stupid is going to be welcomed in China or like anywhere in the world?
They're barely welcome in America.
No, here's the thing. Here's the other thing. I think I'm obviously like I don't like the alt-right, but the thing is like these pseudo leftists are just so easy to hate by everybody that like what the right does is to be like, oh, you see this is communism. This is why communism is bad, and then like certain people buy into that, and then like they're just kind of swayed. They're not completely won over, but then at the very least, they just don't want to be associated with leftism or communism at all anymore, just because of some of the buffoonery.
And who can blame them, right? Because all they see is from the left is just the inherent sense of elitism, and the left can criticize the ruling power as much as they want. Say we are not establishments, we're not centrists, but at the end of the day, they will side with the establishment when you see it for them because the people are wrong. The people are always bigoted. The people is never pure enough. So who can pretend to be pure? And that's the ruling classes, that's the ruling order. So that's why in the past year I feel like half of the left was just supporting Biden for presidency, even though everybody knows what Biden is.
I just had a thought that I thought was good, but I just forgot it.
Happens.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I forgot what I was gonna say, but then about the whole socialism with American characteristics thing is I guess I don't necessarily agree with the way that Caleb talked about it. I mean, um but I mean it's kind of like how, Tsarist Russia and the Soviet Union more or less shared the same borders, but they were completely different things. So it's what I mean, it's like America as a um as a settler colony does need to be abolished. It does need to be replaced with something progressive. But and then for example, like oppressed nations within the US, for example, like in the Black Belt, for example, should be given the right of self-determination, whether or not they remain in like a post-revolutionary like state that exists where the US territory now is. We don't know. Like we don't know how history will play out if that were to happen. But the way that it's okay to have criticisms of that, but the way that some people carry it out is just like, okay, if you're American, you're automatically bad and you can't be redeemed, even though these people are like.
And who are you to say that? Like, aren't you American? Like
another thing is I remember my thought. It's half of the time it's not even like the what's being said that's bad, but it's just how it's being said. That's like, oh my God, you had this potential to win these people over, but now you just fucked it all up. And the whole like, who are you to say this? It's kind of like, have you seen Weeds, the show?
No, have you?
I haven't. I haven't seen it either.
Okay, anyways, there's this one scene where Shane, one of the characters, when he was still a little boy, got called to the guidance counselor because he wrote this rap song in class that was like very just aggressive and like violent, like talking about like bitch, you don't want to test this, blah blah blah, I'm from the streets of Agrestic. But when the guidance counselor talked to him, he was like, the guidance counselor was like, your classmates are very concerned about you, and he was like, well, they're all a bunch of bitch ass white kids. And the guidance counselor was like, oh, I hate to break this to you, but you're a bitch ass white kid.
Right, it's so ridiculous. You see, the thing is, people, actually ordinary people, they don't spend all those time doing those purely performative things.
We need to let people know that America is bad. It is a reactionary settler colony, and everything that the United States currently stands for is bad. But you don't do that by saying, okay, well, you're American, so you are bad too. Fuck you too. No, that's
I think even the far right, some of them even understood this better than so-called leftists in the United States, because I don't know if you noticed, like there's for far rights who recognize, the American states is an empire that's waged endless war on other nations, it never gives a shit about its own people, and therefore that's even people like Donald Trump has to really pander to his constituents of being anti-war. And in a way, he's relative to a Democrat. He is more anti-war than the Democratic Party. Biden is currently going to send more troops to Afghanistan, if I remember correctly.
Into I think maybe Iraq as well.
Yeah. So here's what I think about, with all the problems we complain about the current leftists. I think at the end of the day, and no matter, and we say they criticize, America's bad, blah blah blah.
It is.
And at the end of the day, I think they are more American exceptionalist than even the more chauvinistic average American, in the sense of,
I wouldn't say so. I think they're about the same, but it manifests itself differently.
No, what I mean is that when they criticize the original sins of America, when they criticize Columbus or whatever, they are in the position to criticize that way because of the hegemonic liberal order that the United States erected. You know what I mean? Because whenever U.S. American leftists, they criticize on purely moral basis, almost. They're saying, these things are bad, these things are evil. criticize, I don't know, and then they are bad, but the question is, they are criticized through the lens of U.S. liberalism. They will look at China, for example. They will having no idea about the actual living condition there in China, in Russia, or in any other country, and they just say this violates human rights. You're doing this is bad. Blah 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 blah, and they can speak it because they don't need to deal with the things as the imperial center. And when in January, when the Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, most of them just knee-jerkly saying, "Oh my God, we need to defend the American democratic institution," even though people around the world intuitively think, "Oh, this." No, the empire got what it deserved with ordinary people just storming the seats of power.
I wouldn't call them ordinary people, but it's like whatever.
Yeah. But just the regardless, you have like weird people. I don't know, just people, not people in Viking horns or something, but just complete rentals. Just doing all the shit in U.S. Capitol.
It's like for the first time in their lives, Americans, liberals especially, are feeling a fraction of the terror that the politicians they support cause abroad all the time.
And what I'm trying to say is that I think. For the past year, there's lots of social movements, right? We have the initially a Black Lives Matter protest over police brutality, and then it turned into something very, very, very weird about, I don't know, canceling TV show episodes or something. But
I don't know about that.
You don't know about so and then removing like so it started as a real organic anger, I think, and then it just becomes a purely corporatized thing. It's like you have like major corporation, you have fashion corporation pulling out I don't know, black models or something that is completely detached from this original meaning. And
it's like some of the excesses of the great proletarian cultural revolution, but backed by certain elements of the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a great bourgeois proletarian, great bourgeois cultural revolution or something.
资产阶级文化大革命.
Yeah, but
I think what you're trying to say right now though is I made a tweet thread about this a while back, and it's talking about how what communists and other leftists need to understand is when people, develop politically, they it's because they are disillusioned with the current order of things. So then that's why in America, they people take the path of least resistance, which is why in America, in the West, their defaults are usually either social democracy or fascism. And why is this the case? It's because these two, social democracy and fascism are a lot more similar than people want to admit. They're both attempts at, the third way between, communism or real socialism and like capitalism. And this is especially relevant in America because like communism has been so damn like demonized that, you talk to people and they're like, well, I'm a democratic socialist because socialism without democracy leads to dictatorship, like Stalin, who was really, really bad. No, Stalin was based. But but then like if you have democracy without socialism, then it's capitalism, and that's like, okay, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but okay, let's that's not how things are. I mean, I would be nicer in real life, but they the thing is both are like this because they remain bourgeois dictatorships. But the thing is people like, I don't know. Like the other thing is in America, fascism it takes form of like, just like the alt-right, just outright racism and all like just bigotry and stuff like that. But they don't see how like fascism abroad can like dresses up dress itself up like in progressive garb, and when that happens, its resemblance to social democracy is even more apparent. I mean, you look at color revolutions like Maidan and or some of the the Hong Kong protesters. A lot of them are trying to dress up those protests as like left. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
and progressive.
Or even
And
in Bolivia, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think social democracy and fascism are so readily accepted by people who are disillusioned with the current order because at the end of the day, they're highly compatible with like the type of individualism that's just sacred in the West. I mean, I'm not saying that we're gonna waste our energy on converting, committed fascists, but we need to understand why some people who are just beginning to question, the system might turn to fascism, and we should seek to win the ones when some of the ones over who are willing to listen. I mean, the ones who are just very committed, like, okay, they're a lost cause, like we need to isolate them. But Leninism, what is it about? It's about winning over the advanced segments of like groups, and then getting them to win over like the more middle of the roaders, and then you isolate the backwards. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
And not enough not enough care is given in the West. Like the Western left is more concerned with virtue signaling that and like punching Nazis, which I have nothing against punching Nazis, that's good. But if you're at the point of punching Nazis, you're a little bit late, don't you think? I think disrupting the liberal to fascist pipeline is very important. And that's not going to happen if you're just constantly alienating the masses from you and saying, oh, like your whole existence is wrong.
Also, I think the the street Nazis are also just easy targets because they're not in the position of power. Whereas the very forces that sustain, fascism or fascist-like policies, by the U.S. Order is actually the liberal or even social democrat establishments. They have this nice face. They are polite, but the damage that they are being doing to both the American people and the people of the rest of the world are far, far greater than, I don't know, random trolls from 4chan or something, right? And the left, there's a sense of priority or almost a sense of like primary versus secondary contradiction here.
Oh, yes.
That they just they don't understand. They just think they never get the priority. They think they can just do these things and like they want to almost like act out their politics post-revolution in a world which the establishment is still in power. They want to gulag people when you don't control the gulag or something.
It's like if you don't have dual power, if you don't have a real mass movement, like yeah, you can get your friends to like unfollow certain people on Twitter, but none of this has any bearing in real life. You need to realize this. But people, I mean, you know this, but people need to realize this. It's
I think another thing when it comes to the question of like social democrats and fascists is that a lot of people think in these like super ideological terms. When in reality, most conservatives are not ideologically like identifying, with fascism or with, this or that ideology. And I think people need to think more so in terms of, class and also what national, like the national question, the class question when determining like what kind of alliances you want to make. And so when there's people who try to engage with reactionaries, it's not so much because they think there can be an alliance between these ideologies, but that there can be an alliance between like the kind of like more backwards masses that might be represented by these more extreme, ideological characters.
exactly, which is why we need to be among the masses and understand where like bad ideas come from. By the way, there's only 3 minutes left before the the stream's gonna end, so I think we should restart a new session so it doesn't abruptly.
It's a great idea.
Sorry, there must be an audio problem before. Let me just repeat that. So what was the question? Trump caused a lot of changes in how people in China view America, or just lots of memes? I think Trump fundamentally changed how Chinese people view America, because before Trump, a lot of Chinese people, even me to a degree, I think, still think that the American liberal order is an inevitability, is something that cannot be shaken, and deep inside they just always think that America is superior, is more advanced, and even some people who will think the liberal democratic system eventually will triumph. But after Trump, there's not that kind of delusion. People can see the inherent weakness in the so-called liberal democracy. They can see how fake it is because it's extremely arbitrary. It's you can have make such complete. It's based on very archaic rules, and it's not even fair because of the amount of disproportionate power, the media, the oligarch who has all the money have. So after Trump, Chinese people, especially younger people, are actually gaining lots of confidence in the Chinese system. They are actually seriously reevaluating Chinese history to see how much progressive change have been done in China. And there are some bad things, there are definitely struggles, but the progress that China made in industrialization, modernization, and recently with poverty alleviation is unimaginable in America or many other places. So there's a much greater sense of confidence, and I think it's probably it's now more young Chinese are more patriotic and more interested in Marxism since the end of the Cultural Revolution.
Oh, for the longest time, especially in mainland China, I feel like people they were just like, oh, whatever works. We don't really care about Marxism, Leninism. That was I think you could see that was what most people thought. Like they didn't concern themselves with these things. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't
You
when
were
I
like
was in
that.
China. Yeah.
I mean, still there's a lot of, I'd say most people in China are still like that today, but then now they're just like, okay, but we don't want what America has. Yeah, there seems to be this sort of misconception I find on the pro-China Western left, that every man, woman, child, and dog in China has studied all of the works of Marx, Lenin, Engels, Stalin, it's Mao, etc.
Most barely read any. Most people don't care, and
Yeah.
and
I mean, that should change. But...
Yeah, they're changing. In the past, even when you do have Marxist education under the official means, it's
textbooks
it's
that are
textbook. Yeah, and
they're like this.
And it's one of those classes you go in and just roll your eyes. I have to do this to fulfill my credits or something. But right now, I mean, it's still, I won't say it's the mainstream sentiments, but you've seen young Chinese students complaining that they can't learn enough in the official Marxist classes. They want to learn more. So you have people being self-taught on not just Marxism, but even the history of Chinese revolutions, online, on video platform, on forums.
On that topic, I have a Chinese language channel that teaches Marxist Leninism, and before it was intended for Taiwanese people to better understand these topics, but I find Taiwanese people aren't really watching. It's a bunch of mainland teenagers. And then they're re-uploading it to Bilibili, and then they're I showed this to my class in school today. My teacher liked it.
Yeah, even weirdly enough, a lot of young Chinese are learning their basic intro to Marxism from Americans, like Professor Richard Wolff or something,
or Taiwanese people like me. They're
Yeah.
They watch my videos. They're like, wait, this is a Taiwanese accent. How How has he studied all this stuff?
How is he so based? Yeah. Let's see. I can. So, there's one thing I want to discuss that's kind of a bigger issue, but I want to see if there's people have any question. Anti-Chinese sentiment is on the rise, even within populism, which worries me. That's true, and I think that's the biggest challenge of the American. You see, like the mainstream left, the people, the left represented by AOC and such, like they are very anti-China, but in a logic that is consistent with the leftist logic, just moralism, liberalism, one that sounds at times even radical in rhetoric, but you are always, because you're materially, objectively based upon the American imperial power. So therefore,
No, it's they take like these sort of like things that like they just learned about in America, like, oh, there's like white supremacy and it's a settler colony, and then they try to like copy paste it and then like force it onto trying to say, oh, see, Han Chinese are like the white people there, are it's like Han supremacy, and then it's a settler colony because the Yuan dynasty united like the different areas of China in the past, and then like during the Qing dynasty, this got incorporated, and I'm like, okay, well, Xinjiang's been a part of China for longer than like California's been a part of the U.S., right? So shut the hell up.
Yeah, I think this is a nice transition because when we talk about Yuan, for just to use your example, either Yuan or Qing dynasties, these are not Han ruled dynasties. Yuan was ruled by the ruling class of Mongols, and in Qing, the ruling class Manchu.
And they weren't capitalist empires either. It was like, it's like, past the imperial China was like feudal.
Yeah, in many ways. But
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is that people has this image of China being this ultra nationalist country, I guess, that everything is assimilated by the Han culture. Everything, is
how Manchurified us Han Chinese have become because of the Qing dynasty? Think about some of the words you use, like for example, "lata" for like messy.
Yeah.
That's not Han. That's Manchurian vocabulary.
This sounds Manchurian. I didn't know about this before, but it sounds not like Han.
Yeah,
like the Han word. But I think what's interesting for China is even from the beginning, even before the PRC with the Republic of China, China was never defined as was never thought of as a nation state, right? It's because of the diverse nationalities in the old Qing Empire. So
Sun Yat-sen tried to kind of make it like that because he was so inspired by the West, but it didn't really work. I mean, you know how like you had the 5 big nations within China that they tried to create, like, and turn into this like kind of greater Chinese nation, 中华民族.
Yeah.
I think people didn't really feel like they belonged to a 中华民族 until recent decades, and that's only because all of the different, like all the 56 different 55 minority national cultures have been so respected and like preserved and developed under the PRC. It's only by this sort of a mutual respect and harmony that like then people will voluntarily like kind of combine into a greater that's why it's kind of interesting. I always find 中华民族, or the concept of a Chinese nation, interesting because China is a country of 56 nations, like nation as in like nationality, like, but I guess with this sort of like common cultural psychological makeup, common territory, common economic activity, over time there has been an emergence of this sort of like idea of a Chinese nation, but with like these sort of sub nations, or the existence of 56 nations that form a super nation, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I think the 中华民族 or the Chinese nation is not even understood in the same way that the Westerners think about nations, because nations it's generally think about as one people, one lineage, one roots or something, and there's a shared history that people try to find with 中华民族, but it's always presuppose different background, people with different background, different roots coming together to form this, like you said, almost a super nation. Because China is not like a nation state. It's almost like, not quite, but it's closer to a realized Pan-African state than a Western nation states like, I don't know, like Albania or something.
It's because in the past, when feudalist states like capitalism rose and like feudal states naturally, like the state did emerge like on a nation by nation basis. For the most part, there's still imperfections. You can't there's still gonna be like minority nations and stuff, but there's that sort of stuff going on. Whereas in China, it was like a feudal like empire, not like imperialist as in capital. You know what I mean, right?
Yes,
like,
yes.
Yeah. So then there's gonna be like different nationalities within China that we're all subjects of the emperor. That's what made them Chinese like in the past. But then like when China changed, it was thrown into a new world with like a different world order that it just had to adapt. But then like what you were determines kind of who you become. Like how do you make sense of everything? How do you fit everything in? That's why like these sort of things just emerge differently in China than like in Western Europe, for example.
Yeah, I think right now, from our point of view, there's a tendency, I think, to see that the old European style nation states that rose during the 19th and early 20th century is being outmoded. More and more people are seeing the world as what they call the civilizational state, with China understanding itself as a civilization which by default is multinational, dynamic, and constantly interacting with other civilizations. You see similar discourse in Turkey, and you see it's always with Russia, with Eurasianism, for example. And then you see even some in European continents, they are trying to form this distinct continental identity that's different from Anglo-American.
The Soviet Union.
Yeah, the Soviet Union, right? I think
after a while, at first when the first Soviet Union first formed, I'm sure people were like, yeah, I'm Georgian, first I am Azerbaijani, first I'm Uzbek, then I am Soviet. But then as the longer the Soviet Union existed, like by the time like it was the Brezhnev era, I feel like most people who were born then would be like, okay, first and foremost, I'm a Soviet, and then I'm a Ukrainian.
Right, but I think to even go beyond the Soviet Union, because Soviet Union is still a federation of nation. They think of a federation of national-based republic, right? Like, but even beyond that, like China, it's you have special administrative provinces, but it's China is understood as something that's transnational.
Yes,
in Soviet Union, don't quite get that. I think there's some inherent paradox within the Soviet Union, and I think there's this tendency today to on the one hand rediscover your national roots. There's always been great resentment against transnational entities like the US, but also within Europe, for example, against the European Union, etc. But there's also a bigger striving to find different kinds of a higher sense of identity, if that makes sense. And this striving is inherently contradictory with the Anglo-American liberal order, which purports the world to be abstract, to be focus only on the individual, right? So focus only on abstract human rights and laws over history, over even culture and languages itself.
Then liberals don't understand this, and then like that's why they're what's really funny is most liberals would agree that the idea of an ethno-state is fascist and bad, right? But then for some reason they want to carve up China into a bunch of ethno-states.
The thing is, if the liberal dream gets realized in China, like let's just say, something happened, the Communist Party got overthrown and they try to establish a liberal democracy in China, what would happen? It would be something like, it will be Balkanized, and it literally happened with like the Balkan.
Yugoslavia.
And Soviet Union too. You will have nationally defined, supposedly democratic republic, and there will be constant ethnic tension. There will be war of almost extermination, as you've seen in ex-Yugoslavia, and to a lesser degree in the Soviet Union. That's what they mean. Like liberalization almost means extermination and collapse.
They want Han and Uyghur to start hating each other and start killing each other.
I think one of my friends who joked that if the CIA and the America government smart enough, they would have actually support Han chauvinism or Han nationalism in China, instead of criticizing China for being a Han nationalist, because it's only by doing that they only strengthen.
Actual Han chauvinism would create the collapse of China.
Yeah. That's why it's interesting. But right now, since they keep doing that,
now you've just given them an idea.
Yeah, and also people in China says, because there's obviously organic chauvinism as in all places, but you cannot justify China on Han nationalism and chauvinism, because China will collapse. So you have to basically choose: are you either pro-China or are you either a Han nationalist?
Mm-hmm.
So I want you. Someone asked the question: what is the main currency in the CPC? I heard there's different camps, but Xi represents the ML camp. I don't know how much you know this, but from my impression, I'm not actually expert in the internal working of the CPC, but Xi represents how should I say? Not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a ML camp, but a camp that seeks to reconnect with the revolutionary past of the Chinese Communist Party, because
certainly different from the Jiang Zemin camp.
Yeah, and his predecessor Hu too.
Hu Jintao was just an extension of Jiang Zemin.
Yeah. Basically,
he served for 10 years, had power for exactly 0 days.
Yeah, he's basically a puppet. I don't know how much of a puppet he is, but he's basically.
That's what people in China say.
Yeah, I know. But he's represented as someone who actually trying to bring back the history of the Chinese Revolution, and the CCP factional dispute is always very complicated. You have people with different orientation, but yes, he does represent that tendency, and there's still a conservative, in a sense, bastion in China who oppose him. The remnants of the Jiang clique or something, the Jiang camp seeks to oppose him. Let's see if there's anything else. I'm screaming. Please, okay. What the future holds for China? What do you think the future holds for China? Well, I think the young people are with Xi, right? That's my impression. The younger generations are heavily, definitely more so than older generations, but influenced by the Xi Jinping thoughts and the idea of a new way of life with the Chinese dream, because they understand their lives. They're one of the main beneficiaries of Chinese Revolution history, and so I think so far, with Xi in general, I think it's a good direction. It's never perfect, and there's always been plenty of criticism. But I think, in my view, the current triumphs of the Xi factions in the CPC is a very good thing. China imposes one-child policy on Han citizens, but doesn't have it for ethnic minorities. That's very true. One-child policy was almost generally an urban Han thing. Even in rural Han area is poorly enforced, and ethnic minorities are completely exempt. What kind of supposedly Han supremacist states or genocidal states limits the birth of its own majority population?
China's genocidal. It's pretty shitty at genocide.
Although I guess the Manchus were the true settlers, live logic. No, the interesting thing about Manchus not only is that not like, I guess, capitalistic, but the Manchus, they basically assimilated themselves with the wider Han culture, right? Like, because
They've assimilated themselves while they assimilated us at the same time.
yeah. Because in China, the word for it, in Chinese, the word for this is 同化, which I think is a little bit different because the connotation of the English word assimilation is one-sided. You have something assimilates the other, like you have almost an object and a subject. But with 同化, it literally means to become the
Mutual.
same. Yeah. So it's almost mutual. It's bi-directional, and that process has always been going on between various Chinese nationalities, especially with the nomads in the north.
One great example is the Mandarin that we speak now, Standard Mandarin. It's based on the Beijing dialect, and the Beijing dialect was heavily influenced by like the Manchus, the Jurchens, and all of those like different groups. If you listen to like the way if you listen to the way they speak and you listen to the way that like the past like Standard Chinese, like for example like in Nanjing or like the Southern Chinese dialects that preserve like a lot of the characteristics of like Middle Chinese and Older Chinese, like from like the Tang Dynasty, you can tell it's a very apparent, like the Manchurian influence is very apparent.
Yeah, to the point that sometimes like
Like Northerners sound like are all like like when they speak.
And to the point that from what I read, like certain people in Vietnam or in Taiwan, even in South Korea, who are anti-PRC will say that they're not even real Chinese anymore because their language has been polluted by barbarians like the Manchus or something.
People in Taiwan don't really say that.
Oh,
I think the older KM, like the super old school KMT, which aren't really taken seriously, like they'll be like, oh, they're not the real Chinese anymore because
I
also
only
don't destroy culture, but it wasn't but the argument isn't because they've been like Manchurified. That wasn't really the thing.
Yeah, it's only
nowadays separatists. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter, they're Chinese and we're not, so fuck them, everything that's Chinese related. So Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong are the same because they're both Chinese bastards, even though we're Chinese too, but for some reason, whatever.
Yeah, that's what I mean. My father's friends, many of them are like older, like blue camp Taiwanese type, and they've been saying, Chinese culture has been destroyed by Cultural Revolution, or just like the Manchus come from the north or something.
But the Terracotta Army was discovered and preserved during the Cultural Revolution, for example.
Yeah, that's what they say. Right, it's just interesting. Let's see. Let me try to guess over the. Let me try to guess through the chat. The virgin colonial exploiter versus the Chad tributary silk trader. The liberals have already been crushed. I would like to know what the direction is like if the liberals have already been crushed. So, Leonardo, I think in the political central power, there's the consolidation of Xi is a big strike against them. But I think on the social level, in everyday social level, especially in some of the older intellectual circles, the so-called liberals in China are still quite influential. You'll be actually surprised in how influential liberal voices are in Chinese institutions, especially universities. That's why
too much for my liking.
Yeah, too much for mine too. That's why the term for it for them are like a 公知 or something. Yeah, like literally mean public intellectuals. It's like the same thing with the Twitter blue checks. What they say in the United States, those people who are very liberal and they say they put their own ideal way of life or morality against the actual livelihood of the people. Those people. Nation states is a product of common language, politics, and education.
I saw a comment I want to comment on from Cosmic Bread saying it's sad that North and South Korean are almost different languages now because of all the Western influence in Southern language. Not quite. They're still mutually intelligible, but the South does incorporate a lot of Western loanwords, whereas in the North there's still loanwords, but they use it to they spam it on a far lesser degree. Like for example, this ballpoint pen in South Korea is called ball pen, but in the North it's called 원자필. Yeah, so
Sounds very different to me. I don't understand Korean.
원자필 is 연즈비.
Oh, okay, okay.
Like the same hanja, the same characters,
Yeah,
but read
yeah,
in
yeah.
Korean it's 원자필. Yeah. Or a cell phone in the South it's called 핸드폰, or like hand phone, but in the North it's called I think 수전화, which also means hand phone, but 수 is like hand, and 전화 is 电话, or telephone.
Mm-hmm. See.
The DPRK actually released this whole documentary. Like it's a very short documentary about like the westernization of South Korea, and they're saying like they have all of these like foreign loanwords such as this, and one of the ones it listed was motherfucker, which is motherfucker.
Let's see. Western means West. U.S. have different racial origin, but there is an Anglo-American hegemony. True. Wait, what's this? Kaizoku. What's? Wait, sorry, I lost that comment.
There's a question about Taiwan from El Rey Yadelos Namos, asking how deep are the brain worms right now? That separatist leader lady is on some wild shit. So I guess it's just about like Taiwanese politics.
I guess that's a very open-ended question, but I guess for more information to really understand that, you would need to know the background history of like the political development of Taiwan, and for that I highly recommend my I'm gonna plug myself here, but the series I did on Carl's Silk and Steel podcast. I did a whole series on the history of just the history of Taiwan and its political development, starting from like prehistoric times to like the late Ming, early Qing dynasty, and it's 50 years under Japanese rule. It's returned to the Republic of China, and then 4 years following that, the KMT's retreat to Taiwan until present day, and like all the different developments. Because I think even especially in the pro-China Western left, not even just the Western left, not even just the left, but like I think with many people, like Chiang Kai-shek was just okay. He went to Taiwan in 1949, and that's that. But they don't really understand like what KMT rule in Taiwan was like, and like the various different oppositions towards the KMT, starting with the communists who were then thoroughly exterminated by Chiang Kai-shek, to like the petty bourgeois opposition, like pro-bourgeois who were like pro-bourgeois democracy that later developed into what is now the DPP, or the or Tsai Ing-wen, that lady you were talking about with the brainworms, her party. So yeah.
Someone want to repeat the name of the podcast?
Oh, Silk and Steel.
Okay, yeah, someone typed it.
Yeah.
So it's good. I think another thing that you briefly mentioned about the Western's lefts in their attempt, even the pro-China Western left specifically, in how they operates, because we know that the U.S. is a declining hegemonic power. It's still the hegemon, but it's undoubtedly declining, and I don't think anyone disputes us anymore. Everybody can see it with the handling of coronavirus, etc. But what do you think about this? Because what do you think is after going how the world is going to look like after the end of the U.S. hegemony? For our view, I think there are going to be a more like what they call multipolar world order.
Beijing Biden will teach us all Chinese. I can't say. Well, I mean, I don't think a new power could rise that's just like America can rise, because like American hegemony arose in very specific under very specific circumstances. You had World War II, and like all the rest of the imperialist powers were too weakened by the war, whereas like America just kind of was like the sole beneficiary of the war, basically.
Hmm.
And unless you recreate those conditions, I don't think a sole like a unipolar world can rise again. I mean, even in after World War II, there was a Soviet Union, but then the Soviet Union, collapsed. So from like the 1990s until like recently, the U.S. has been like the sole hegemony. But I don't think those conditions can arise again.
Yeah, yeah.
Because even if China falls like in like 50 years or something, I mean, the U.S. is still sufficiently weakened at this point.
Hmm.
I don't think it can make a rebound.
Yeah, and um, although I think the weird thing though, I was just taking a few step back, is that when pro-China leftists, when they talk about China, when they're no for good intention, when they're trying to counter the forces, the discourse of imperialism, I feel like they're still kind of behind in times. They treat China as just one of many victims of American imperialism, and they don't quite see how China is a rising power and is one of the major contributor to the decline or the fall of the U.S. liberal order. And they still use this moral reason, imperialism is bad because poor people in the third world die or something. It's almost like
I mean, that is true.
it's almost like almost a philanthropy, right? Like, look, those poor African kids and children starving. Do you want to?
Oh, another thing is I don't think Westerners really understand this, but I think us Chinese people we don't want to be pitied.
I don't think anyone like to be pitied. To,
Certain like I think some radical liberals like who realize that can translate into like social capital in their little circles like it. But other than that, like the hipsters with their like with their like pity porn slam poetry.
no, I think that's one of the even wider problem because I think the left's politics can be summarized as pity politics, right? Like those people are suffering, even in healthcare. People needs help from the governments, etc. But people really don't like to be pitied. They don't
We
want
want respect.
They want
We don't want to be
respect.
yes.
Like
Because when you're pitied, it's almost as if you're babied.
yeah, and that's why I think Americans, especially the American people, they absolutely despise being pitied. They would almost rather die than the elites trying to pity them. I think this is a problem with the American left because they identify with the ruling power. They say, or the government should do this, should give more welfare, should give healthcare to people. It's all like socialism for them is almost just give three things away. And for the American people, that is an extremely disrespectful dynamic in two ways. One, you're siding with the state as it currently is. The elite, what they think of the elites or the deep states or whatever, the government, and you're being condescending towards them. Socialism was because in China, socialism never have a connotation of just getting free things. It doesn't make sense to think about socialism that way. Socialism means
Socialism isn't just free things because by that definition, like every single state that's ever existed, whether it's feudal or capitalist or socialist, is socialist because to carry out its functions, it provides things like roads, for example, but that doesn't automatically mean it's socialist. Yeah, I see where you're getting at, but I mean, there should be a guarantee that people should survive. I think putting human interests, putting the human interests of the masses before profit is something admirable, but it's not really just I know what you're talking about. You're talking about like the anti-work left, who's like we shouldn't have to work at all, and we should just
all right.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, just all right. are back.
Yeah. I am. I was thinking in the terms of this question of multipolarity. Even if China will not uh, obviously for obvious reasons will become like a traditional power. In a sense, it could set an example of a question of recuperating. I don't know if that's the word. This is a need of some kind of sovereignty, national sovereignty politics. And it was, for example, the help that has given. It was normally related the China situation with the left in Latin America. In the question of recuperating this sovereignty politics. It was always some kind of support and trust the situation between this left parties like Venezuela, or for example also in Mexico. And recently there was with the recently return of sovereign politics here on our country, there was also some kind of people that is working to revive a better kind of relations with China, going far away of the traditional situation of we being always being bonded with the United States. For example, the example that we are the ones that buy a lot of among the very vaccines that we buy the Chinese vaccine, the CanSino vaccine, or for example, there's some kind of people here that are talking about the reviving of the Chinese now, because in the past Mexico was a kind of trade center when was New Spain, colonial New Spain was a trade center with China, with a now with a now a naval fleet with now that go from Acapulco to commerce with China. And some people in the same sense of this velvet and road initiative, there is some intellectuals left people in Mexico that is talking to revive the now and now in China, with China, Mexico. So it's that kind of sense that I see is the relation of the paper that could have China in this new situation of multipolarity, a new center of example of a recuperation of sovereignty politics, national politics.
Let's see. So, Xiangyu, you mentioned about almost we need to like socialism, a future socialist movement need to emphasize a type of meritocracy, but not the same type that we've had. Do you want to elaborate a little more on that, or?
I talked about that.
Yeah. I think, but
Well, I think a lot of the whole thing about capitalism and I think the issue is a lot of the Western left just can't imagine life under any other system but capitalism, even though they are against capitalism. So that's where like this sort of anti-work attitude comes from, because these people can't imagine work outside of the context of capitalist exploitation, but labor is what gives our lives meaning, like being part of society and laboring and creating value for society and bettering our society together. I think another thing about meritocracy is, yeah, we should the baseline should be guaranteed. You shouldn't have to worry in a country, for example, where there's more empty houses than there are homeless people. I mean, that there shouldn't be homeless people then, right? But then at the same time, I think people in general like find working for what they have to be fulfilling. Wouldn't you agree? It's kind of like there's a difference between like being given a car by your parents than from like working and then buying a car with your own money.
Yeah, I think lots of problem people had isn't working itself, but what kind of work and the meaning of your work. Lots of work.
And the fact that it sucks away your life and like you don't have time to pursue any like cultural activities or just doing the things you want to do, and you feel like all of your life is just working for the enrichment of your capitalist overlords. That is very alienating. But then I mean, if there even after socialism, there's so much work to be done. I mean, if you have like shitty infrastructure, like that needs to be fixed, that's work. You have undereducated people, like because of like shitty schools in America and poor areas. Well, that's a lot of work to be done over there, don't you think? That's kind of goes into the whole destruction versus construction thing. Like there is the aspect of tearing down the reactionary system, but then like once that's done, there's a lot of work to be done in constructing a new society, and creating a new consciousness among the masses. That's all work.
And also the work is being done on what's presently there. I think for Westerners and American in particular, they think about socialism as something that's already existing in their mind, a system, and then they apply it to the world. It's almost like it's like what they say, the heaven on earth, in this Puritan sense. So that's why you have so-called anti-China leftists. They have a preconceived notion of what socialism already is in this very idealist manner, and then because China doesn't fit, because the reality that is China is incongruent with that socialism, therefore they would deny the actual concrete practical achievements of socialism and of the communist movements, and will just reduce China to just a form of imperialism or something.
With China, there's a little bit more contention. Like even within China, there's like the more there are people who believe that China is revisionist, and we're not going to get into that there. But then like the people you describe, they do that even with Stalin, especially. They're like, oh, he's a red fascist. He's not a socialist because, whatever reason they come up with, like a whole lot of more. Mm-hmm. But I think I want to get back to what Jorge was saying. I think was he speaking about the what is it, the restoration of sovereignty?
And national politics, sovereign national politics in the case of Latin America, independent sovereign national politics, independent from the United States. Exactly.
So you're saying that with the downfall of the United States, these countries and like the people there will have more breathing space to further develop their own national characteristics and their own culture, independent from like neoliberal hegemony. Is that what you're saying?
Of course. Mm-hmm. In the case of Mexico, Bolivia, Venezuela, it's what is happening.
Same thing with Western Europe, even. Like
yes.
Greece a few years ago, like when this whole Syriza thing happened and they thought about leaving the EU, they started making ties to Russia. They oriented themselves toward the east. And you also have the same thing in Germany right now. Like Germany is kind of interesting. It's kind of caught up between West and East. You have this liberal establishment for historical reasons tied to the US and the West. And this whole Navalny shit fucked things up a little more. Now you have Russia and China. Russia canceled diplomatic relations with the EU just recently. Now you have Russia and China joining a military union. So that's also something to note here.
One thing that we need to know is like Russia is not a socialist country, but it's a capitalist country and it has its own interests. But the thing is, it is not in a position to become a world hegemony like the United States is. And in their pursuit of their interests, it undermines US imperialist interests. And as of now, the US is the number one hegemony, which is in the case of like imperialism, oftentimes it becomes the primary contradiction that people need to face. So anything that undermines U.S. hegemony is should be critically supported and is objectively a good thing, even though it doesn't mean that we're fans of Putin or whatever. But that's at the end of the day, when I agree with multipolarism because okay, some people, some like vulgar leftists will be like, oh well, some fascists say multipolarism is good too. Well, this is the thing. Let's say even if all of these powers within a multipolar world are capitalists, when the smaller countries that are stuck between different imperialisms, they have more maneuver room when
Exactly.
these different powers are like in contradiction with one another and have their conflicts.
It's all about gaining sovereignty.
Or even just breathing space.
Yes, and free oneself from the U.S. establishment.
Reminds me of that song. I think it's from Germany. How it's We're All in America.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are many more songs. Army Go Home is popular.
And I think we mentioned it before, but this notion of primary versus secondary contradiction is again crucial here, because people just thinks some people just tend to erase the difference between these two, just things. You have this contradiction here is the same as there, whereas they neglected the primary context of Anglo-American hegemony in the first place.
Hold up, one thing, Leonardo, this is kind of not the topic for today. We will get back to that in a later stream. Ask me that question again, and then we'll talk about that.
Let's see. USA. So I think we can tie everything back to what we've been discussing before. In your view, I guess it can be a summary or it can be a further elaboration. What should an individual, not an individual, what should the left, if it exists at all, do in Western, especially American context? What is your advice as someone who I respect, at least, to especially a lot of young people out there who are trying to find trying to discover a correct path, if I should say.
I think Mao Zedong said something good, which is it can be said that some people argue that if your intentions are good, then it's as long as your intentions are good, then it's like even if you fail, then it could be forgiven, which is true. But this is the thing is, if your intentions are good and one of your strategies has been tried and it's proven to not work and cause damage, if you don't change your tactics after that, can it really be said that your intentions are still good? Right? So I think one thing I would like to say is be a little bit more just kind of realize that we don't have all of the answers, and that finding the answers requires practice, and especially it means stepping out of our little left echo chamber. I think another issue that I see with the Western left is utter disrespect for theory, because there is, yes, dogmatism is a problem, but when you don't read theory, you end up trying to reinvent the wheel. And I mean, one book I really recommend is the History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union short course, which it'll talk about the various trends of reaction in like Tsarist Russia and whatnot, like the Narodniks, the Black Hundreds and whatnot. And what's really interesting is you could see like very similar trends that still exist today among like, the left and like the right and etc. It's because like the same class relations more or less still exist. So seriously, take study more seriously because, okay, I understand not everyone can read, not be or has the time to read or whatever, but that means those who can read and do all that stuff need to take this stuff more seriously, because now it's our responsibility to educate those around us who might not have the time or the education to read these things and make sense of them. Another thing is have more trust in the potential of the masses. Yes, the masses themselves aren't going to spontaneously like erupt, detonate a revolution, but without them we're nothing. So there's, for example, with the Bernie-crats, I see one big problem is they're obsessive over, like, look at which celebrity endorsement Bernie Sanders had. Oh, look, like Pussy Riot supporting Bernie Sanders. And it's like, why? It's the quote from Mao Zedong is the people and the people alone are the motive force of the creation of history. The people, not celebrities. So there's that too. I think these are just some general advice. And the other thing is just most people, I think most people are have good intentions, and they're good. They have bad ideas because they live in a reactionary society. So we need to take that into consideration and meet people where they are, and then work with that, and then try to win them over. Now, I mean, there's certain people who we can't do that with, who are just actively, doing propaganda for bad ideas, and those people need to be isolated. But those people are not the majority of the people, and if you're doing that to too many people, then you're isolating yourselves. So I think that's another thing that we should take more seriously. And another thing is, at the very least, not everyone is in the capacity to do like very serious organizational work, because for a variety of reasons. But I think the least that we can all do is do the best we can to educate ourselves, like especially with current events, with history, with theory and stuff, and then spread information and do what we can in that regard. And don't downplay, don't be like, don't have this whole anti-intellectual attitude about reading and theory and stuff, because this is a thing, so-called lived experiences, those are important, but without proper theory, like the same lived experience can be interpreted like in countless many ways. That's why like having a good grounding and like in your political education is important, so you can make sense of it, so then opportunists don't come in and like just like sway you and then like move you to like reaction. Because I mean, look, I think a lot of yes, the Trumpers, like what is it, Trumpism, the main base is like the petty bourgeoisie, like certain elements, certain segments of the petty bourgeoisie. But then there's also like working class people who are like kind of tricked into supporting that. And shit, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
You know where I was going with that, though,
Very
right?
beautifully. It's
agree
very good
completely.
statement.
Yeah.
We should clip that. Make a video out of that.
Yeah, but yeah, their ideas don't fall from the sky. So it's like, and the other thing is, don't just like talk about the destruction, tear this down, which it is part of the process. But then it's also the building up, the constructive aspect of it. And you tear down, as you tear down statues of Columbus, you need to erect new statues of them, new figures that people can identify with and and look up to.
Yeah, I think I just want to emphasize one specific thing you said. I think read, learn, but also, aside from theory, which anyone on the left can give you a bunch of recommendation, but I think history is very important. I think this one gets really neglected, especially in the West. I think Mao himself read a lot of history. He actually read much more Chinese history than he did with the classical Marxist work, I think.
Well, there's just much more Chinese history to read
Yeah,
than
yeah,
Marxism, because like
Yeah, but
How
he
many
I
years did
think
Marx live?
but he began from history, I think. Then he encountered he really starts encounter Marxism. That's what I mean. And I think especially the history, not just of socialist countries, but of
Exactly. No, you need to understand the history of your own community and your own country.
especially that.
That's
Especially.
why I highly, highly recommend. This can't be said enough. Harry Haywood's Black Bolshevik, because it's got everything in it. It's got theory and it's got history. He's lived through a lot. He went to Spain to fight in their civil war. He fought in World War One. He's studied revolution in like the Soviet Union. He's met Stalin, for example. He's seen the rise and the demise of the CPUSA. So it's what's impressive about his book is how you get to see how like he um used what he learned and then tried to apply it to like the history of the United States. And you learn a lot of history about not just the Soviet Union, but like about the United States, the Black Belt, that sort of stuff. So
One last thing about trusting the people. I think I want to also respond to Leonardo said in the chat a little bit when on the Wall Street bets, the shorting thing in the past couple of weeks. Again, I think the left has this inherent arrogance. They see something going on with a bunch of really pissed off young people on Reddit are trying to do something to fuck up Wall Street, and they just wave their hands. Oh no, they're just doing capitalism. Oh no, they're not. They're not. They don't know about socialism. They're not doing actual damage. I think it's wrong to have this attitude. I think you should be humble first and see what is actually going on, and because for my view, it doesn't matter how many money was won or lost during that whole thing. What happened is, everybody can see just how rigged the stock market and the Wall Street is, to the point that they would literally ban you from buying, from trading, and literally selling off your shares without your permission. All these things are very important to expose to people to. Just because people want to earn some money to become rich, I mean, everybody wants that, right? That's the dream. That's the in 20th century China, everyone want to have a good land and work by themselves too. Like, these are desires that are real. These are real things. You cannot just go in and dismiss people like that.
can I add a point to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing is, unless someone like is proven to be like just beyond reform and just should be isolated, start with points of agreement and work from there. Like if you see somebody who supports Biden, for example, I mean, okay, a lot of them are shit, but and just like a lot of people who support Trump are shit. But hey, if there is potential, start with points of agreement. Hey, I hate Trump too. I hate the Republicans, but this is why this approach. I understand where you're coming from, but have you maybe heard of this perspective? And then kind of reevaluate these things and just here's some things that maybe we should all think about. And then if somebody, voted for Trump against Hillary, which not too hard. I mean, how can you like Hillary? But still, I mean, still like a lot of Trump supporters are like a lot of Trump supporters suck. But I mean, there's an element of among them which is just, hey, we've been screwed over by like all of these lofty promises by Obama, and Hillary doesn't seem to have a message. Biden doesn't have a message, but Trump has a message. I don't agree with the message, but but at least he has a message. Then that he's not going to carry out, but he still had one nonetheless. It's like, hey, we hate Obama too. We hate Hillary too. We hate Biden. We hate the Democrats, and but the Republicans aren't too different actually, and this is why this just kind of plant the seeds. They're not. I mean, they're not going to like probably most likely they're not going to be all like, oh, Stalin's great, but at the very least, you plant the seeds, because political development starts, I think in the case of all of us, is when the more disillusioned we become, the more we seek answers. And like with the whole thing about like why people start turning towards like, you know, social democracy or like Bernie Sanders and stuff, or why are people so drawn to conspiracy theories? Well, because conspiracies do exist, but then a lot of those conspiracy theories are wrong. But they're drawn to it because they feel that something is wrong, but they don't necessarily they're not necessarily connecting the dots in the right way. So then they start, you know, they feel like this thing offers some answers, so they get drawn to it. So what we do is we need to come in and give answers, or give some direction, you know. So start off with points of agreement and then work from there. You'll have an easier time, and you'll probably piss less people off. I should follow that advice more. I tend to tell people to fuck off on Twitter a lot, which is why I'm locked out for 12 hours, 2 more hours now. But
like what you just said, most people have good intentions. Even Trump supporters, even if they do, I don't know, bad things, they're shit or whatever,
in
they
Chinese,
still have good intentions. That's something to work with.
In Chinese, you know, 人之初性本善.
Yeah, and also not only you should educate others. Oftentimes, dialogue goes both ways. You can learn sometimes you can even learn more from people who you think you know less. Just go to them and talk. You can learn more yourself. That's a
learn why they support reaction.
Yeah.
For example, why were they swayed to voting for Trump? Like certain individuals. I mean, everyone's case is different, and then like figure out like how this could be prevented with other people.
Yeah. All right. I think. Do we?
By the way, have you advertised your Twitter already here? If not, go ahead. We will link it anyway in the description. But
yeah.
Oh, you mean advertise my Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let me find. So it's.
I can. It's is it as not Xiangyu, right?
Yeah, I'll write it down. I'm gonna make my handwriting a little bit neater.
Follow this guy's Twitter.
It is at not Xiangyu. Is it going to be focused? Yes. Because I've been suspended 2 times and I'm not supposed to make new accounts, so just saying it's not me. And you can my other links, like my Spotify, my Bandcamp, YouTube, and all that stuff. It's in the Linktree link on my Twitter.
Okay, I pinned it. So, does anyone have any last comment? All right, then. Music promotion. Do you have any music promotion?
The links in my Twitter bio.
Okay, links.
Yeah, there's a Linktree link that goes to like my YouTube and all that stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, no neat feed. I do not have OnlyFans.
All right, so
I can afford air conditioning.
Or so someone asked the last question. I'm going to try to answer this. It seems China is now shifting to focus more on tackling some of the contradiction that came from the growth era. Do you think China is entering kind of a new stage or just natural adjustment? I don't believe something like that can just be a natural adjustment. It's definitely there's definitely a lot of new development in China. On one hand, yes, China is always constant reform. They're always adjusting and adjust. It's kind of a joke among Chinese people. We're always reforming, but at the same time, the current ills from the growth era, the fact that you can even address there was a growth era means that you're currently in a different era, right? Like you're doing something new. So, it's very difficult to summarize or even just to express what this new era entails, but it's definitely something new. All right. Okay, sorry guys, sorry about the technical issues. It's my first time, and this is our first live live show with a guest, and
Chat was
everybody,
having fun.
yeah,
They made jokes with that.
like everybody should say thank you to Xiangyu one more time for having the generosity to come up with us and share his insights and experience.
No, thank you all for inviting me and seeing me as someone. I'm just some guy, you know. I'm not like some sort of like.
We're all just some guys.
Yeah, I don't feel like my insights like that, you know, that special or that good. But you know, thanks for. Yeah.
All right.
谢谢你看得起我。
你看得起我才对. You have more
You know,
followers than we do, so.
Thank all of and thank you all to all viewers. I guess 40 odd viewers for you know, just being engaged and everything and asking all those good questions, and yeah.